Greetings, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Before we get started, I would like to remind everyone of the following. Each participant has been muted on entry and will remain on mute throughout the webinar. However, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We will have time to address any questions at the end of the webinar. While we will review the chat, our primary focus during the question and answer portion will be the Q&A pod. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded. The recording, along with a copy of the slides, will be posted to the OCS CSBG webinars page found through the link posted in the chat.
Thank you, Nikki. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the fiscal year 2023 Community Services Block Grant Annual Report webinar series, where today we are going to discuss a bit about the Tribal Annual Report. Next slide, please. My name is Manette Galindo, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Policy, Data, and Evaluation Branch Chief here in the Division of Community Assistance within the Office of Community Services, where we administer the Community Services Block Grant, commonly referred to as CSBG. And we are so excited to welcome our tribes and tribal organizations today to talk a bit about the annual report. We see the annual report throughout the CSBG network as a keen opportunity to tell the CSBG story. And when speaking to our tribes, we really want to make sure that we hone in and leverage on the ability of tribes to tell their story of how they leverage CSBG funding across their communities to serve those most in need. Throughout today's webinar, you'll hear from the Lux Consulting Group that provides target training and technical assistance to our tribes and tribal organizations, from DCA staff who have extensive tribal experience, and then we will also provide some information on some resources. I'd like to introduce you to today's panelists. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, my name is Manette Galindo, and joining me today as your presenter panel will be Charles Chair, who serves as a statistician here in the Division of Community Assistance. Charles is a statistician with the Policy, Data, and Evaluation Branch. Prior to this time, he was an assistant teaching professor at Rutgers University School of Social Work for several years as a social worker in different capacities in Boston, Tucson, Tohono O'odham Nation, Philadelphia, and Cambodia. Before social work, Charles serves as a Linux consultant, and he has experience at the tribal community action level, working for the Tohono O'odham Nation Community Action Agency. Charles is an MSW from Boston University, a BA in sociology from the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and is also a PhD candidate in social work from Rutgers University. And joining Charles is going to be Nikki Fraser-Curry, our senior record specialist, who you all who have come to know in her time here with DCA, providing direct training and technical assistance to our tribes for an on-time submission of their annual report. Nikki serves as a senior record specialist for us, and for today's call is running the production of the conference and webinar. Then finally, Helen Chachan, who is with the Lux Consulting Group, who will provide a beautiful and colorful introduction of herself when she gets to her section of today's presentation. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Charles to go through our agenda for today. Charles?
Great, thank you, Manette. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Charles Chair, working for the Policy, Data, and Evaluation team in DCA. So I just wanted to give first an overview of what we'll be covering. Manette gave the welcome. I'll be briefly discussing an overview of OCS. From there, we'll move on to CSBG Tribal Annual Report, OLDC Access, and then lastly, TNTA resources. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, the OCS, Office of Community Services, has ultimately 4 priorities. The first priority is administer, priority 1, administer high quality programs that reach those most in need. Lift up, priority 2, lift up voices from the field. Implement, priority 3, implement cross-cutting initiatives. Amplify, priority 4, amplify connections to administration priorities. So in sum, ultimately, all of our work connects to these 4 priorities. Next slide, please. And then within CSBG, the Office of Community Assistance, Division of Community Assistance partners with states, territories, tribal organizations, communities, and community action agencies to eliminate the causes of poverty, increase self-sufficiency of individuals and families, and revitalize communities. Our social service and community development programs work in a variety of ways to improve the lives of many. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Helen, who will talk about the CSBG Tribal Annual Report. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles and Minette, and appreciation to the OCS DCA team for allotting some time to talk about the annual report. Helen Chacon. Good morning. My name is Helen Chacon, and I am a citizen of the Tohono O'odham Nation. I also have blood ties to the Ponca people. This morning, I am actually broadcasting from Edmond, Oklahoma, which are the traditional homelands of the Quapaw, Wichita, Kiowa, Caddo, and Apache people. So good morning to everyone. Next slide, please. All right, thank you so much. The annual report, the submission of the annual report is part of a cycle for the CSBG grant for tribal grant recipients. It is currently, thank you very much. We're currently in the evaluation and reporting phase. Of course, the other parts of the cycle, including the tribal plan and submission, that occurs at another time in the year. But we just wanted to kind of give you a visual of where we are at. This is a journey really that really kind of renews itself each year. So we are glad that you are able to join us now so that we can talk about all of the great things that you've been doing with your program. Next slide, please. All right, so as you get ready to sit down and complete your annual report, again, remember the dates for these are for fiscal year 23, and you can find the exact dates on the action transmittal that Annabelle dropped the link for in chat just a few minutes ago. And there it is again. Thank you very much. We really want to encourage all of our tribal grant recipients to use the Tribal Annual Report fillable PDF tool, which is an Adobe fillable form that you can download also from that same link. And also you can download on that same page all of the submission step-by-step instructions, which include some very easy to understand instructions for uploading the annual report and any other documents that go along with that to OLDC. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the annual report? Well, as you might have guessed, it's a report. And basically, I like to think of it the same way that Minette talked about earlier, and that is an opportunity to talk about how successful you were in meeting the goals and objectives of your program. Of course, more officially, it certainly is an accounting of how you spent your funds to deliver the services that you talked about in your annual tribal plan. Of course, you'll also talk about how many people you served and the types and characteristics of those people who were served. You'll reiterate some of the information on goals and objectives from your tribal plan. And talk about how the actual CSB funding was allocated and mobilized to help meet those goals. In addition, you will have an opportunity to talk about how your goals, how the funds expenditures, how those contributed to the implementation and success of CSBG's national goals, which Charles touched on earlier. All right, next slide, please. And speaking of submission, deadline for this year's tribal annual report is March 31st. Those of you who are looking at a calendar will probably note that March 31st actually falls on a Sunday. So OCS is observing the following business day as the day for submission, and that would be April the 1st. So again, all annual reports should be submitted via OLDC by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, April the 1st. All right, next slide, please. All right, well, we are going to take a few minutes here to just walk through the annual report fillable tool. That's the Adobe form that you will be downloading from the link that Annabelle has placed in chat. We really encourage you to use this form. It's really easy to follow. And we feel like, well, go ahead and go to the next slide, if you would please. We feel like that most of our grant recipients who've used this particular tool actually have an easier time of understanding and submitting the information that talks about their successes. And also they have fewer errors than other recipients who don't use the tools. So again, really strong encouragement for you to use that tool. I should also note that in this year's tool, you can report on CARES funding. CARES, of course, is the coronavirus, oh gosh, I forgot the entire name, but is the coronavirus funding that it was implemented in 2020 and distributed to tribal grant recipients. Mostly this is going to apply to smaller states and smaller tribes. And some of you may have already completed your CARES funding reporting, and that's fine as well. All right, so downloading that fillable tool, pretty easy. You'll click the download and you'll want to save a copy on your local computer. If you start to make changes without saving a copy on your local computer, they may not be saved and you'll have some data loss. Also, we encourage you to save often as you complete that document on your local computer so that you don't lose any of that information. Next slide, please. The areas where you're going to be entering information you'll see those on the fillable tool. Most of those boxes, in fact, I think all of them are outlined in red, so you can either tab to or click to each of those boxes and simply start entering the text or other information that needs to be entered. All right, next slide, please. There are basically three sections to the annual report tool. So in that way, it's a little bit, it's not quite as long, I guess I should say, as the tribal plan submission. Section 1, of course, very simple. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Just kind of housekeeping details in terms of contact information. Section 2 is where you're going to spend most of your time just talking about how the funds were used. And then if you are required to do some additional CARES Act supplemental funding reporting, that'll be covered in Section 3. Let's go ahead and talk about Section 1 super briefly. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please report the CARES funding in a separate section, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment. All right, next slide. This first section is super easy. You're really just going to be talking about the name of your tribe and or organization that received the funding and providing contact information. It's usually for the tribal administrator or the tribal chairman, whoever was listed in your tribal plan as the primary contact. It'll be their title, their telephone number, and email address. Next slide, please. And we're going to have these reminders as we go throughout our presentation today. So just be patient with us. We just want to keep on reminding you to save your document. And we really recommend that you save about every 5 minutes, but at minimum, save after the completion of every section. Next slide, please. All right, so we've finished up kind of the basic contact information. Now we're going to talk about how you use the funds. Next slide, please. And just a reminder that the CARES funding and then CSBG regular funds have their own sections. The section 2 talks about CSBG regular funds only. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you happen to have opened up the actual fillable tool using the link that Annabelle provided in chat, you can actually scroll down to item number 3. And this is where we start talking about the funds and how they were budgeted and expended through your program. So I'm going to scroll down here and make sure that we are, I can see that same page as well. Just give me a moment here. And as I go through the discussion of the various fields that you're going to have to complete, I'm going to use as an example a totally fictitious program that I made up in my own Helen mind, so that we can have a little bit of context in terms of how we can write about success of our program. So I'm going to use, I'm going to say that my fictitious CSB program is meal delivery to homebound elders on the reservation. So in my discussion, I'm going to talk about, in my discussion of funds, I'm going to talk about what I budgeted and then what I expended on. So let's go ahead and talk about that right now. Go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So in this section, again, section 3, you'll see this allocation chart. Actually, I think it looks a little bit different on this year's version, but it's asking you to do a couple of things. It's going to ask you how much funding you had, and then which of those, I think it's 9, 10, 11 areas you actually budgeted money for. And this is actually pretty easy, the budget column. If you completed your tribal plan submission, and if you adhere to how you had planned to use those budgeted monies, you can simply just copy those numbers or take a look at those numbers and drop them into this budget column here. If you actually ended up changing some of the way that those budgets were allocated, you can also make those updates here in this chart. The other part of this is the amounts of funds that you actually expended. So hopefully you drew down all of the funds that you were awarded, and now you can talk about, again, using the same 11 categories, where those dollars actually went. All right, go ahead with the next slide. Okay, so going back to my meal delivery program, most of my clients who were served, well, not most, but they were tribal elders. And in my program, we served about 30 elders in the 4 districts of our reservation. So in this section, it's just going to be as easy as me saying 30 elders were served in 4 districts. And then I can add some additional information about the elders. Maybe I want to say 65 and older, homebound, as opposed to more mobile or static, or more mobile and out in the community. Again, here, just a description of the clientele that was served. Next slide, please. All right. Item 5, pretty easy too. Again, if you're referring back to your tribal plan that was approved probably about a half, well, I guess it would be about a year ago now, you can actually just speak to those goals. Let's say that my goals, for example, for my meal delivery program was to serve those 30 elders in 4 districts, and maybe my goal was to deliver hot meals 7 days a week to each of those elders through the winter months of November through February. So that's about 12 weeks. It's about 84 meals per person. If you look at the 30 elders, and all in about 252 meals altogether. So if I had written about that, including those exact numbers in my tribal plan, I can actually drop that information into this section And then as far as the third bullet here, I can talk about how well I did. Let's say I met all of those goals. I can talk about how those aligned with the CSBG outcomes, some of which, again, Charles mentioned earlier in the presentation. All right, so let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Okay, so here, item 6, again, you'll see that these categories match up to the allocation chart, or excuse me, the budget expenditures chart that we just looked at a few minutes ago. For my project or activity, my elder meal service, most of my budget and expenses fell in health and nutrition. And I also had some activities and expenses in linkages and coordination that it turns out I didn't actually talk about in my tribal plan, but I'll talk about here in item 6. Now, you'll see if you're scrolling through that PDF tool, you'll see that the next couple of sections are broken down into A, B, C, D, E, and F. And I'll talk about that in just a moment, but let's go ahead and move to the next slide. The beauty of those 6 subsections is that you don't have to complete all of them. So for example, for my elder meal service program, I'm only going to have to write about two of those sections. One of them is going to be that section 6J, I think it is, and the other is going to be for the linkages and community coordination. For those other sections like 6A or 6B or 6C, I can simply put an NA into that section since it didn't apply to me. All right, very good. Well, let's talk about, thank you very much. Next slide. Let's talk about item 6A. And I just want to run through a couple of examples for each of these, even though I'm not, at least for my elder meal service, I'm not actually going to be completing this particular section. But in terms of self-sufficiency, some of the funds, let's say for another person's program, could be related to casework that was done to assess needs and resources of, let's say, families who were receiving food cards or food vouchers. Also, case managers who actually worked with families on a plan for support, and then of course, linking clients to resources. Going on to item 6B. In terms of employment services, let's say I had a program that really focused on providing employment services. Some of those services might have been job development and job placement, which could include resume writing, interview skills, and those sorts of things. Vocational and skills training. Maybe I funded some participation in a health home aid certification program. And then of course, eliminating any other kind of barriers to work, like providing transportation or gas cards to tribal members who actually had to drive a distance to go to the job that they actually got. Let's move on to item 6C. This is education services. And you can see here, if you were using your funds for a program that included education services, these might include anything related to adult education, like, for example, a GED study program, or a program that allows folks to study so that they can pass the GED. Literacy programs could be improved reading skills, any sorts of scholarships. For example, maybe you helped with scholarships for that home health aid certification that I mentioned in item 6B. Any sort of enhancement programs for child development, and also any kind of anti-drug education, like, for example, maybe you sponsored an opioid awareness program for the local elementary school. Let's move on to item 6D, which talks about programs that provide income management services. So some of the services that you might have provided and that you'll talk about here are any type of budgeting assistance. And this really is kind of family budgeting, like groceries and bills and that sort of thing. Tax preparation, tax credit information, and of course, any sort of medical or benefits claims assistance. Moving on to item 6E. This is for housing services, which incidentally is probably one of the items or sections or I guess priorities that many programs focus on. Home ownership counseling, for example, my own tribe has a home ownership counseling program that I can enroll in. Also loan assistance through some of the federal funding programs and legislation that's been provided. Landlord and tenant relations, really maybe just linking up folks who are looking for Section 8 housing and those who provide it. Other types of housing assistance, homeless services, could be for just kind of the generally homeless. It could be for survivors of domestic violence, kind of safe harbor housing or home services. And then finally, home repair and rehabilitation. For example, maybe you're helping repair air conditioning units in the summer. All right, let's move on to item 6F. This is emergency assistance program. So again, here we can see that a lot of what we just talked about in regular housing also falls under, or also could fall under emergency assistance services. And that will include anything like temporary housing, rental mortgage assistance, cash assistance, and short-term loans. I know a lot of tribal organizations and tribes provide food vouchers. I know Choctaw Nation here in Oklahoma has a really strong food debit card program that they run for their elder program. Energy or utility assistance, any kind of linkages that the applicants might have with LIHEAP or LIWAP could also be discussed here. And then of course, emergency food, clothing, and medical services, and then any sort of disaster response. Let's go ahead and move on to 6G, thank you. Partnership and community engagement services. This is where the tribe or the tribal organization is partnering with other groups in both on the reservation and off the reservation to make their program successful. So for example, in my fictitious elder meal service program, one of the groups that I ended up partnering with, which I hadn't really planned to, but was the local AmeriCorps service. And we partnered with them to provide drivers for the vans that actually delivered meal services to those elders for those 3 months. So that would be something that I would want to write about here. You know, how many volunteers? Maybe we had a dozen or so volunteers on rotating shifts, and then talk about maybe the number of miles they actually traveled to deliver those services, numbers of meals, that sort of thing. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the final item, I think. Oh no, we still got one more. Regular funds, youth development services. Again, this is an area that a lot of tribes and tribal organizations are providing grant services to. So any sort of violence-free zones, any sort of intervention, meditation or mediation programs, mentoring and life skills training. I was recently reading about a tribal organization that actually connects elders with students in middle school, which is kind of neat, to do some mentoring. Job creation, any sort of entrepreneurship programs. I think STEM programs are a big draw in this particular category. And then of course, any sort of after school childcare programs. All right. 6I, linkages and coordination services. This one is very similar to some of the community connections we talked about a couple of slides back. Here, any sort of information, referrals, coordination, case management, Also, especially important, any sort of linkages and coordination between anti-poverty programs, and then coordination with other public and private sources. So, for example, using my fictitious meal delivery service, again, we actually ended up getting a private donation of a van from someone who just didn't need any more. It was a local restaurant owner. So that was something that they helped out with. And we also worked with some other programs in the Tucson area off the reservation, just to provide additional information about Section 8 housing and other meal services that were in the Tucson area off the reservation for our elders who were spending time with their families during the holidays. All right, go ahead and move to the next one. And then 6J, health and nutrition services. This is squarely where our elder meal service delivery program fell. As you can see here, it covers food banks, food delivery services, food production programs, any sort of health, education and counseling, transportation to and from health services, and community garden programs. So this is where I would write a lot about the goals and objectives of our fictitious program, which again, delivering meals for 3 months, 7 days a week, 1 meal per day to about 30 elders. And also we can talk about any sort of additional nutrition services that were provided along with my meal delivery service. All right, next slide, please. Item 7 is where we get to talk about how my accomplishments, like maybe I met 100% of my meal delivery goals. Here's where I can talk about how I accomplished them, what exactly I accomplished, how they synced up or aligned with those priorities that Charles talked about earlier, and specific successes that you would like to highlight. And this is, I think, probably, in my opinion, one of the most important sections, because it gives us as tribal people, as indigenous people, as tribal organizations, the opportunity to really spotlight what we are doing to help our communities. So don't be bashful here. For example, if my fictitious meal delivery service ended up delivering meals to 50 elders instead of 30, I'd want to talk about that we exceeded our goal, and that we were actually able to deliver not only 1 hot meal, but 2 hot meals during certain holidays during those 3 months. So again, anything that we can do that's going to reduce or eliminate the causes of poverty and help people become more self-sufficient, that's really, really what I want to write about here in item 7. All right, next slide, please. Item 8, our regular funds and outcome data, and I'm going to swing back over here. Just bear with me for a moment to my form. I'm going to take a breath here because I know I've been just babbling on. Just a second here. All right. Okay, so in this section, we're really wanting to talk about any sort of data that addresses the progress towards those national goals. And here again, probably in concert with item number 7 that we just talked about, more stories or information that help demonstrate the impact of that funding. I've read a couple of annual reports where folks actually provided testimonials from some of the clients, and that, my friends, was super impactful when it came to understanding what those goals are. Incidentally, you can see those national goals on page 19 of the PDF tool in case you need those. All right, let's go ahead to the next slide. Another reminder, stay calm and save on. Remember to save your document as you work. And I will just say to you that recently when I was just filling out the annual report, just to make sure that all the fields were working, I did not save one time. And I had to go back in and enter all my information. So as someone who did not stay calm and save on, I want to encourage everyone to save often. Next slide, please. All right, so section 3 really is for the CARES Act supplemental funding, and this will primarily pertain to folks who received CARES funding and who were on 2-year plans starting in fiscal year 22. Yeah, not 20, and maybe 23 if you received additional CARES funding. But I want to run through this particular section quickly. It talks only about any CARES Act supplemental funds that you have not previously reported on. And it's going to cover the same exact sections that we just talked about for CSBG regular funds. So don't get these two parts of the report mixed up. Section 2 only for CSBG regular funds. This section 3 about CARES Act. Let's go ahead, just take a real quick look at the sections. For item number 9, again, just an accounting of how those funds were spent to deliver your services. How did you spend any of the remaining funds to deliver the services? If the tribe or your tribal organization spent less than 50% of your funds, you can talk about that in item 9A. That will include both budget and expenses. Speaking of, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Here is an allocation chart. And again, it's been updated and you'll see that on the live PDF tool if you have clicked on the link that Annabelle dropped into the chat there. But it looks strikingly similar to the one in the CSBG fund slide that we just talked about. So same categories, same 2 columns. Here, once again, just talking about how you spent those funds, what you budgeted, and then what you actually spent. Next slide, please. Item 10, again, very much like item 6 that we just talked about above, but again, focusing on CARES Act supplemental funds, number of clients, and characteristics. Next slide. Item 11, this is where you'll have the opportunity to go to each of these subsections and talk about some of the goals and objectives and outcomes, depending on which of these categories that you fell into. Next slide. As we talked about for the CSBG funds, if you only provided services in 2 of the, I'm sorry, could you go back one slide? I'm a little bit overzealous. Yeah, thank you. If, for example, if you only provided services in self-sufficiency and employment for all of the rest of those sections, as we did in the CSBG section, we can just put an NA. All right, thank you very much. Next slide, please. Remember to save your document as you work. Don't be Helen. Save on. Next slide, please. And really that brings us to the end of the fillable tool. I will just say very quickly that there's just some great general information that you can actually read about. That's not something that you have to actually fill out, but it's actually part of that fillable tool. It has contact information, instructions, etc. So hopefully it's pretty straightforward, and again, strongly encourage you to use that. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Nikki. Thanks.
Thank you, Helen, for your detailed overview. We've provided ODC step-by-step instructions. We have provided, or we will be providing that link in the chat. the step-by-step guide is accessible through CSBG Action Transmittal 2024-02, which is the action transmittal for annual report submission for fiscal year 2023. So you can see those chats in those links in the chat. Moving right along, Grant Solutions is the platform on which to submit your CSBG tribal annual report. And we just have here screenshots of the steps to do that. So you'll log in through Grant Solutions to get to the enhanced homepage, and that just provides the dashboard view. You would click on yes to move to the default homepage for enhanced version. And then we have what we see here as just in the red blocks, different steps to take during your process. The process for the annual report doesn't have a certify feature. So as Helen said, to save often, and also at the end of the process, you will be hitting the submit button. Different pop-ups will ask you to confirm your submission, and you'll click OK in those boxes. This OCS OODC tip, be sure to test your OODC account prior to submitting to confirm login credentials are up to date. This is very important that you do so as soon as possible. If you experience any issues, please email csbgdata@acfhhs.gov. And this is our dedicated email address for addressing any issues with OODC. To ensure OODC access, this is current CSBG administrators. You will have your username and password to log in through login.gov. For new CSBG administrators, you should verify that you have that. And if not, then you will follow the process for getting a new account through Grant Solutions. And that'll be a two-step process of completing the recipient user account request form and the OODC access form. And both of those forms are to be submitted to the Grant Solutions help desk. And that information is also in the step-by-step guide. And now Charles will cover our training and technical assistance resources. Charles.
Great, thank you, Nikki. Next slide, please. Thank you. So although we encourage you to reach out anytime for any training or technical assistance, we are setting office hours for real-time technical assistance. And those 2 days and times are Thursday, February 1st, 2024, 11 to 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And then Thursday, February 8th, 2024, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Next slide, please. Just for your information, I do want to note here on this slide your regional contacts, your respective contacts in terms of program specialists, financial analysts, and policy data and evaluation specialists. I won't go ahead and read every single line, but I do want to let you know that there is a breakdown and that there are one of these three staff who are serving your respective region. And just so that you know, because if you're wondering how will you get this information later, we will be making this PowerPoint available to all of you after the webinar. Next slide, please. When you are thinking about reaching out for assistance or any sort of questions, we do ask that you follow these suggested guidelines. So for all requests for assistance, small or large questions, these should be sent to your program specialists. If you have any financial operations or monitoring requests or questions, please email or contact your program specialist as well as your financial analyst together. If you have any questions for data collection and performance reporting, please reach out to your program specialist as well as your data and evaluation specialist together. And to get all of this information along with within this PowerPoint, you can visit the DSA staff contact info for more extensive information, such as their emails and their phone numbers. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Helen, who will go ahead and talk about additional TNTA resources.
Thank you, Charles. So you can also contact for additional information our Tribal TTA helpline, which is staffed by Deluxe Partners. And you can see that information here. I will say that probably the easiest and fastest way to get a hold of us is through that tribalTA@luxcg.com. Someone is constantly monitoring that. Also, there are some online resources that include the annual report submission action transmittal link. We also have that available at our CSBG tribalTA.com website. You can find some additional online technical assistance by going to the FY23 annual report toolkit page, which Annabelle is going to drop that link into the chat here in just a few moments. There's links that we've been talking about throughout this presentation are included there as well, in addition to some very helpful, very short, less than 1 minute training videos. All right, thanks so much. Back to you, Charles.
I'll take it from here and thanks again to everyone on the call. We are now at the question and answer period. If you have any questions, again, please enter your questions into the Q&A pod. And just a note, at the end of the question and answer period, we will launch a brief poll. It's very brief. So if you could please stay on the line at the conclusion of the question and answer period, we will move right on to the polling. And we'll give a few moments for anyone on the call to enter Q&A. Questions.
We did get one in the chat that Nikki covered during the housekeeping slide, but just as a reminder, these slides will be available on the CSBG webinars events page. So you have access to them in real time should you need to reference any of the materials reviewed today during today's call, along with the recording.
Okay, I think it's a sign that all our presenters was very thorough in their review of the CSBG Tribal Annual Report tool, and all of the sections covered there under there, and how to gain resources. So I would like to thank everyone for joining today's call, and if you could just stay on the line for 1 moment for the poll.
We got a couple of questions. I'm just going to say this one out loud. Are we held to the percentage we included in the budget section? If there is any variance, and Nikki, you can see the presenter mode on your screen.
Sorry
If there are any variances, we just ask you to provide some additional information. If you have a special circumstance, both Helen and Charles walk through some of the TNTA. We're more than happy to walk through that detail with you to indicate whether or not you need to do something different than the others. But there is an opportunity to provide a little bit more information. But if there is a special circumstance, please reach out